Welcome back to Crafting a Meaningful Life. I'm Mary Crafts, I'm your hostess, and it's another glorious day. I know you get tired of me saying that, but it truly is. I wake up every morning, and at 69, let me tell you, a lot of people aren't jumping out of bed, throwing their hands up in the air and saying, "What's next in my life today?" But that is what keeps me at 69 believing that the year in front of me is still going to be the best year of my life. And that's because I've been taking every day in thinking about what I want to craft, who I want to be, who I'm discovering inside of me, the dreams. I don't think the universe shows us dreams only to say to ourselves, but you can't have that. You have to settle for something else. You can only dream that, but that's not yours. That's not the way the universe works. It just isn't. And so if you've been dreaming it, if you've been envisioning it, it's already living inside of you. And so as we craft this life, we allow you to discover what's next. What step do I step into? Not just lean into, but you actually step into. And to that end, I've invited just a delightful guest with me today, and her name is Stacy Mayer. Stacy, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mary. It is a pleasure to be here. I love that introduction. It just warmed my heart.
Well, I can tell that you and I have similar kind of energy, even though we're different ages and even though we live in completely different areas. You live in Berkeley, California. I live in Salt Lake City, Utah. I can tell that our energies are much the same and that we want to reach out and touch people and allow them to live that very best life that they want to be.
Absolutely. Yeah.
All right. So I live in Salt Lake City and you live in Berkeley, California. Two very different places, but I think we have a lot in common. So what brought you to Berkeley? Is that kind of your first home? Or have you lived there your whole life? Where have you been?
So I grew up in Kentucky, and a lot of my impressions and made me who I am today is my mother, who is also 69 years old and wakes up every day with, who am I going to be this week? Arms in the air. And so, there is definitely a kindred spirit there. Yeah. And then I moved all over. I was in Chicago and New York City and San Francisco. And I actually came out to the Bay Area with a hedge fund in Palo Alto, California. And then eventually I left the hedge fund and bought a one-way ticket to India and decided to stay in Berkeley, California afterwards because it felt like the spiritual mecca of the world at the time to me when I came back. And so it was such a perfect retransition back into society.
I'm with you that there's something about a trip to India that transforms you spiritually and transforms how you view the world and how I can shine my light in the world. I used to think that my helping others was like being out there and doing. And now I think more that how I inspire people most is by living my own best life. And whatever that does to affect the energy that those people live in, I'm grateful.
So when I came back from India, I was a magnet and people were changed in my presence. And I felt it. It was the first time in my life that I had ever felt that I came back and I was so much more grounded and settled in who I was that people wanted to be around me, including my husband, who I actually hadn't been dating until after my trip to India. But he was one of those people that kept following me. And he's also the type of person that I wouldn't have wanted to date prior to this opening up that I did, this letting go, this allowing that magnetic energy to kind of flow instead of, like you described, doing. I was like, always, I have to do, I have to create, I have to make people come to me. And when I finally started to let that dissolve, I just energetically, people came to me.
That's exactly how I see you. And that's exactly how I live. So we are more alike than I ever imagined. Stacy, this is what you do for a living. You help people, particularly women, to step into all that they are. And you do it in a different corner of the world than I do. I do it through my podcast and speaking, and you do it through helping women choose their careers and see their potential. So talk to me a little bit about how you do that.
Well, so I first started out in women's leadership working for an organization in Silicon Valley. And a lot of the work that we were doing was helping women take risks, overcome imposter syndrome, be what I call their corporate badass self to be their strength. And I kind of looked at the situation I was in and I realized I was like, I don't think that these women need help with imposter syndrome and taking risks because they're kind of amazing. Like they were so powerful. What they needed help with was getting promoted, right? Like it was like there was this technical glitch that was happening for them where they weren't actually in the right positions. They were smarter than everybody else in the room, right? Which was lending itself to downplaying their abilities. Like they were living in the wrong box. And some of us say that the corporate world versus entrepreneurship would be like, I have to get out of the corporate world. And I don't believe that at all. I just think that within the corporate world, what they were doing, they were in the wrong title. They were in the wrong group. They were in the wrong organization with the wrong values. And so when I went off on my own, I decided that I wanted to be a promotion strategist. And I actually made up that title because I wanted to be the person that got them promoted. I wanted to give them the tools to make more money, to empower themselves, to be in that right position that better aligned with the amazing woman that they truly were already. And so then that is what the focus of my business has been, in uplifting women into those literally like that things start to match. And Mary, you must know how this is too, as you started to transition your life and transform, that who you already were started to match who you were being in the world and how you were showing up. And that's what I teach them to do.
I love that piece of it because growing up in the era that I did, being born in the 50s and living through that women's lib movement and Gloria Steinem and that whole thing and carrying the flag and the banner kind of thing, it tended to masculinize women. And that we didn't still want to claim all the beautiful parts that made us uniquely women. And as I stepped into being one of the first women CEOs in my community, I realized I did not have to let go of that. I didn't have to stomp my feet and scream my voice to be heard. I just needed to step into my fullness and who I was in order to be seen. It's just like what you were talking about when you got back from India. And suddenly people were seeing you different. You were the same person, but your energy about you had shifted. I love that concept. How do you go about teaching a woman about that?
Well, so essentially, I'll give you like an incredibly practical tool that I teach the women to do, which is called 15-minute ally meetings. And when you hear what that is, you're going to know what I mean, which is one-on-one conversations. And what it does is it takes us away from having to present, right? So when we're asking for a promotion or being like, accept me, right? So that was the doing that you suggested, right? Waiting until our review to pitch our case about whether or not we're worthy. And instead, with these 15-minute ally meetings, we're showing up on a regular basis as worthy. We're literally engaging in conversation. And I always say, pick someone who you have no business talking to and schedule a meeting with them. And then what happens is that person on the other end, the CEO, says yes. And then they get that little twinge of fear and the good fear. And then they say, oh my gosh, I can really do this. And then they show up into that conversation, not telling that CEO about all the great work that they did and trying to prove themselves and having the best ideas, but in conversation as a peer, as a woman, a powerful woman who has something to bring to this organization that matters. And once they start to do that 2, 3, 5, 10 times, it seeps into them. It becomes magnetic. They start to become that person. The people, the bad seeds at their organization start to drop off. And they start to just sort of back off and like, I don't know what's going on with her, right? And then the good seeds start to be attracted to that and to say, wait, why are you still a senior manager? This doesn't make any sense to me. We need you in the room. And it happens over and over and over again.
So the thing that you're trying to teach people, I guess that's how much we are alike, is that I'm trying to teach people, to be their authentic self. Because that authentic self is already all powerful, all knowing, all beautiful, all present, all needed, all accepted. And that you don't have to go in there shouting who you are. It's just granted you. Because I see so many women feeling like they have to prove their worth. And I think that's exactly what you're speaking to. Your worth is already given. It's a constant. It's only how we perceive our worth that then affects how we act.
And so when we're in the wrong role, when we're working for a person that doesn't see our potential, right, it erodes our trust in ourselves. And so sometimes we just need to take that step back and to say, oh, wait a minute. I see what's going on here. And who are those individuals that I can connect with that can remind me of who I am already, right? And it happens very quickly, right? We can get reminded with that very, very quickly of, and I even take it one step further, our authentic power. Because what is happening for a lot of people when they think of authenticity is they actually think that it's this vulnerability, but not in a useful way, right? So it's I have to tell my boss about the struggles that I have at home, right? Like I have to share the how hard this job is, how hard I'm working, right? And all that does is yes, exactly. And then they call that being authentic. I'm being true. I'm being real, right? And I think that the most authentic thing you can do is be powerful, right? To be who you are unapologetically. And go into that conversation asking questions, right? Getting to know them. When we see the most authentic, powerful people, they're the people who don't have to talk all the time. They're the people who are willing to sit and listen, to ask a really powerful question. And then the irony is it shifts the power play over. And then that person who's being asked the question starts to look at you and all of your power and your glory and your settledness, your groundedness. And wants more of that, right? That's where the magnetism comes in. They're like, we need more of her.
So I think it's interesting that we beat the same drum and sound the same bugle in different terms. For example, I talk to people about, let's step out of being a victim. Let's pack your bags and head out of victimville. And instead, can you step into accountability for exactly where you are at this moment in time? No more blaming. Just step in to who you are. It's time to stop blaming your parents, your upbringing, the college you went to, your roommates, your siblings, social media, whatever it is you use to blame for your taking on your own power. And you're talking and taking those principles that I always talk about and putting them in terms of your career, your ability to own your own power, to ask for what you want, teaching women those skills. This is such a needed skill set in our world today. And particularly as women now just, should I be at home? There's so much pull and draw between, I need to have a a remote work job. And there's nothing wrong with a remote work job, but are you choosing that because that means you no longer have to compete for your job? So how do you encourage people in that kind of setting to claim their authentic self and be accountable for it? I can tell you and I are done with victims.
Yes. Yes. And I was done with treating powerful women like victims, right? I think that I don't even know why we talk to other amazing women this way as if they need to be helped. They absolutely do not need to be helped. But one thing we do get caught up in, and you totally named it, as a 69-year-old woman, hands in the air, this is going to be my best year ever. What we get caught up in is the today. And so I like to tell them that their next promotion is so easy and we need to get it done yesterday. And what I mean by that is like, let's say you're a senior manager and you want to become a director. Becoming a director is not your legacy. This is not what you're going to wake up at 69 years old, throwing your hands in the air and saying, this is going to be my best week later ever because I became a director at this company. No, you have so much more work to do in the world and so much more to create. And so what I want you to do is to stop thinking about your next promotion. I want to just get it done, right? So I want you to be level set at your organization. I want you to be in the role. So then we can start doing the work that you're supposed to be doing so that you can start thinking at that higher level. You can engage in those deeper conversations instead of just trying to get promoted and prove your worth every single day. And so there's some tools that I teach that I'm just like, there are simple questions. And a lot of these women are so powerful that all it really does take is one question, one act of directness to open up that next promotion. And then they're like, the only thing I wish is I had done this sooner. Right? Why did I sit in this agony of like becoming director, becoming, right? And I'm like, why don't you become an expert in your field? You have, a board that you need to sit on. You have TED Talks to create, a book to write, whatever legacy you want to create. You have so much more in you than getting this dinky little promotion. Like, let's just get it done.
Okay, I'm going to make a confession to you. So when I went to your website and I thought about you being on my podcast, I thought this has some value for my listeners in helping them step into their value and not just always be, struggling down here. But you're teaching a greater principle than that. You're not only showing people, how to get a promotion with ease, so that the major part of your life's work is really your focus and really where you're going and what should be consuming 90% of your energy, not just like, oh, what do I need to do to get this next promotion so I can climb up in the corporate ladder? You're freeing women. I love that. Way to go, Stacy.
Thank you, Barry.
Because I think about when I was 50 years old before I made that shift into just living every day in fear. Fear of not being enough, fear of failure, fear of not having enough money, fear of this, fear of that, fear of this. And that consumed 100% of my energy to deal with all these fears. Fear of being passed over for a promotion, even though I wasn't owning my own company at that point, but fear of not being selected or chosen as somebody's purveyor. And when I let go, I didn't just let them go one day, but when I decided to step through my fears and claim the best version of me, then I had time to think about what really is my life's vision, my life's mission. What am I gonna end up, and how many people will I influence and be able to touch? Because the rest of this just seemed to flow. I stepped into the flow and out of the fear.
Yeah. And you talked about one of the reasons that it's fearful is because we don't have very good role models. And I really try and show women that the leadership that we're creating doesn't has only existed. I don't say it doesn't exist, but it's really only existed for, I think, the last 5 years. So when we look at Sheryl Sandberg with Lean In, we were still in that masculine approach to advancing our careers. And what a lot of women are seeing is role models, but those role models aren't quite in the C-suite yet. They're sort of like, they might have just gotten in the C-suite in the last couple of years. And so when we're creating something that has never been created before, it is going to feel very fearful. And for a lot of women who choose a corporate path versus entrepreneurship, it's because of the stability, right? It's because they like working in this organizational structure. And so then now I'm going to add a little to it to make them say, hey, let's do something that has never been done before. And so it's embracing that fear to say, oh, wait, I don't have specific role models like that are just given to me, because those role models are out there, right? They're in conversations with women like you, Mary, right? We can go find them, but they might not be our boss. They might not be in the current C-suite of our organization. They're not going to be immediately available to us all the time. And so we put ourselves in these rooms to be surrounded by these women so that we can remember that what is actually possible. And so we start to normalize what we're doing, what we're creating, and then it dissipates that fear. We start to say, oh, there is another woman who is creating the life that I really wish I could have. Oh, it's not completely unobtainable. I can create that for myself. And when we do that, because that's really what fear is looking for, is to kind of that safety. It doesn't want you to die, that part of our brain, right? That doesn't want us to die. And so it's like, okay, well, if that's the case, then I need some proof. So let me go out and find that proof. Let me go find those role models, and because they're there, but we just have to actually look for them, because the ones that are being presented to us aren't always the people that we want to emulate.
So when I speak and when I'm in public settings, I just did my book launch and I had 2 big launch parties. So many women would come up to me and say, I want to be just like you someday. I want to do blah, 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 blah. And I would stop them. I would hold them by both arms and I would say, if you see it in me, it is already alive in you. You don't have to wait. You can step into this now. If you didn't have it inside of you already, you would never see it in me. And the vice versa is true as well. If sometimes I can tell when someone's maybe a little put off by me. Oh, she's such a goody two-shoes. She thinks she's all that, blah, blah, blah. And when I sense that, I say the same thing to them. What you see in me lives in you. And if you're seeing beautiful, positive, emulating things, that's what you're focusing on in your life. But if you see me differently, then perhaps the fear in you is speaking. And so to know that we are way more alike than we are different. Those CEOs that we see in the C-suite, they aren't any different than you. They are the same. And if you see them, they already live inside of you.
You can tap into this really, because I didn't actually realize this until I did a conversation at Haas Business School here in Berkeley. And I felt it more closely with the younger women who were just completely frozen to have conversations with powerful people. And that's where the tears came in. You can really, and if you're a woman who's listening to this and you're having difficulty accessing what Mary is talking about, think about if a 19-year-old said the same thing, right? What would you feel for them? You would be like, what? Of course you're worthy. Of course you can engage in 15 minutes with this human being. Like, you're human beings. You are the same person. And what has happened is, of course, is that we have the corporate structures that were built to have a hierarchy, right? That were built to not be the same, right? And so we're trying as women in leadership to break down those walls, to bring ourselves into that. And so it starts with really just realizing that sameness. I love that so, so much. And that connection, and really being like, it's not like I deserve it. Sometimes I say the recognition you deserve, right? And I don't quite like that, because I'm like, yes, you do deserve it. Like, of course you do, right? But it has that sort of neediness quality to it. Like, I deserve it, right? And also, gosh, you said it. You are it. You have it. It is you. It's already there. And so here are a couple words. That's what I'll teach them. A couple words that you can use in your next one-on-one with your boss that might help that other person also see that.
When you talked about, I deserve this, when I hear that from, whether it's women or men, I'm like, they're just not seeing me. I deserve this. There was a basketball player last year on our Utah Jazz basketball, and after every game, there'd be an interviewer that might talk to me, and he goes, I deserve to be on the first string. They're just not seeing my recognition of how good I can play. And I would always think the same thing. You're living in victimville. Somebody else is in charge of your not being seen. What a sad place to be. But when you suddenly take charge of your presence, your performance, your abilities, you don't have to say, I deserve this. You're going to own it. There's no more deserving. You just already own it. And those words are always a trigger for me. Like, what do you mean you deserve it? Who's in your way? And then you get all that onslaught of like, well, the coach, and then this, and my roommates, or, I was born a woman. Whatever it is, somebody else is in your way from being seen. And I know you and I speak the same language when we are telling people, no, this isn't anybody else's choice or job. It's yours. So let's get to it.
My program is called Executive Ahead of Time. And basically, it's stepping into that deservedness ahead of time, not waiting for the title, that we are that executive leader. And the funny thing is that there are a lot of executives in the program, a lot of SVPs and C-suite executives stepping into their executiveness, because ultimately it has nothing to do with title at all. It doesn't have to do with title, because you can be at that level and not be an executive of your life, not be owning it, still be waiting to be recognized, still be waiting to be included. Or you can be a new manager and be an executive of your life at work and be not waiting to be included, including yourself in those conversations, adding value. And then when value is not taken, figuring out something else, figuring out another way to present it, but really ultimately that ownership.
Yeah. So what happened to this guy on the Utah Jazz was he was traded to someplace else where he can demand people recognize him. But I don't know if you know this, but our Jazz team, we're in first place. And because we got a bunch of new people who were out there to show the world who they are and what they're made of. And, they're ready to take their place. And we got rid of all those whiners. I was expecting great this year.
That's amazing.
I think it's a lesson for all of us that when we really just step into our power. We have a guy last year that was on the second string who actually now is on the first string, not by complaining and whining that I deserve to be there, but by stepping in and owning his power and being magnificent. That's what I try and teach. That's what you're teaching. Own your magnificence, because it's outstanding. So what about those women, Stacy, who just aren't at that spot yet? Who truly are struggling with believing that they really aren't magnificent?
So there's a woman in Executive Ahead of Time. This is my membership program. And so I see these women for every week for a very, some of them several years. And she keeps coming to the calls. And you can tell that she's she wouldn't say that she's struggling to own her worth. She would say, I deserve it, right? She's still fighting that, right? She still says, I deserve it. I deserve this, right? Why won't they listen to me? That's really how she's presenting. So you also have to remember, if you're listening, that your words may not be, I need to own my worth. It's actually, usually it's kind of the opposite, but you're like trying to prove yourself constantly. And so look for those signs as well, that struggle, that tightness usually means that you feel like you're not owning your worth. And so for her, she shows up every week. And I admire that so much. I think that the ability to show up, the ability to say, I really have no idea what you're talking about. I don't know what it would be like to have magnetic energy and have people ask me for a role or to promote me without trying, right? I can't even come close to fathom what that would be like. But I'm going to show up and I'm going to ask a question every single week. And that's what she does. And so there is this willingness, I think, at the first stage of being willing to know that what you're doing might not be working for you. And that just like that softening and opening to something different.
Yes, I love that being willing to be vulnerable. That, okay, what is it that I can change? How can I shift my attitude? What is waiting to be discovered by me that was going to allow me to step in? I think of that era when we were all told to lean in. And at some point, you have to step in. You have to allow it to immerse you, to be embraced by it. And no more just leaning in and looking around. You've got to step into the vision. I was even retired when I had a dream one night about stepping in. And in the dream, I could see, as far as I could see this way, this beautiful vista. And I was just kind of there, just looking in and leaning in, And the voice said to me, it is time to step in. And when I took that step, I'll never forget that feeling. It woke me up of just being enveloped by all that I am, but in addition to that, all that everyone else is as well. And that's what I mean by being in the flow. You're in the energy flow of everyone that's moving. And it doesn't matter who moves first or second or third. We're all moving. And to be okay with being in that flow of stepping in.
I have goosebumps. It's so good. I feel like I'm stepping in with this conversation too, Mary. It's really, really delightful and powerful. I know, no doubt the rest of my day is going to be so much more impactful.
And mine as yours. Because I didn't anticipate that Stacy from Berkeley and Mary from Utah were going to have the same vision of how we empower women. And it's not that we're empowering them. It's that we're allowing them to step into their power. So Stacy, as we come to kind of the conclusion of today, I want all of my women listeners to be able to find you, to read about you, to listen to your podcast, to be able to use your services, to be that person, not just dream them. And because you already are, so step in. How do people go about finding you and just take advantage of your energy?
The first place is Women Changing Leadership podcast with Stacy Mayer. And actually, Mary is going to be a guest on my podcast in the near future as well. And really, that podcast is about looking at that legacy, at that future legacy, the change that we are making in leadership and seeing those examples around us. So what I spoke to before, that we really are that change. And your next promotion is just the beginning of that. And so that's why I wrote the book, Promotions Made Easy, a step-by-step guide to the executive suite, because I believe that promotions are easy. We're just being given really bad advice. And so check that out. And then you can also go to stacymayer.com, where I have a lot of resources available to you completely for free. And then if you decide that you want to invest a little bit more, then I invite you to join me inside of Executive ahead of time.
And all of those links are at the end of this podcast. You can view them there. When you spell Stacy, Stacy, and her last name is Mayer, Mayer. And one of the most amazing women that I've met on this podcast, because you are making dreams a reality. It's what I always say. If you dream it, you can be it and live it. And you're the step-by-step way. I love that.
Let's do it. Let's do it, Mary.
Let's do this together.
So
I'm very excited to be on your podcast, and that we get to influence and change and lift each other's listeners to what is possible that's out there. I know that you have stepped in,
Absolutely.
are living your best life. I feel your energy. Yeah. So thank you for your time today, and thanks for being with us on Crafting a Meaningful Life, because you surely are crafting yours and helping others craft theirs. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm so grateful for you being here. Whether you're listening on Apple or wherever you listen to your podcast, or whether you're viewing it on my YouTube channel, I'm grateful that you take the time to be here. I'd love for you to subscribe, to actually click the subscribe button, so you'll just be notified every time I release a new one. Because, of course, I think that everyone has so many nuggets of wisdom and inspiration that you won't want to miss one of them. So here's a link where you can find me every week, and you can subscribe.
Listen to the full podcast today and subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and more. Crafting a Meaningful Life with Mary Crafts.